there, everyone. Oh, that's the wrong window. How about that one? Yeah, we'll start there. Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. I am Christy. This is Weekend Winters. I haven't spoken yet today. This is the first time I'm talking clearly. Oh, I need to warm up my voice before I do these shows. And I need to do a better job on my hair. I totally just let it air dry, let it do what it wants. I was actually running a bit late because I had a late night last night. Did my first DMing session in D&D. Maybe talk about that at the end of the show. And then did more Dungeons and Dragons. COVID has given me the time to really get my Dungeons and Dragons on, and I am loving it. I'm really appreciating it at a different level than I did when I was like a teenager, when I first started. And I was thinking last night, because I'm not going to be 50 next year, but I'm going to be 50 soon. Should I be embarrassed that at my age I'm still playing Dungeons and Dragons? And I decided no. Hell no. I like it. I have fun with it. Why would I? I mean, men traditionally can follow sports their whole lives, and D&D is another kind of entertainment activity. So why should I be embarrassed about something I enjoy? So yeah, I'm just embracing this sort of middle-age rediscovery of the nerdiness of my youth and reinventing it. And that's, I think, I said I wasn't going to talk about this, but now I can. I think this is a thing I'm realizing about D&D is that, or maybe it's about video games too. Maybe people who get older feel embarrassed about the fact that they play video games. But at least as I have aged, the way that the way that I see the game and how I experience it and how I think about it is far different. When I was younger, it was kind of like the fantasy thing, and I really liked swords and sorcery kinds of things, and the opportunity to fight dragons or whatever. And now for me, there's some really tactical elements of it, but there's also the storytelling. And like last night, I said I wasn't going to talk about this, but hell, we're just going to do that, and then we're going to do the political compass test. Yeah, I know, I'm going to play D&D, and then when I'm in the nursing home too, I'm going to organize D&D sessions when I go to the retirement home. Hell yes, Striped Mongoose, give me a high five. Yeah, last night we'd built up, I've been playing this long-term game with Chrisiosity. It's been going on for several months now. And each of the characters, we've had a lot of adventures now together. There's a narrative, as you know, and there's usually a challenge. You have to find out something about a mystery, or you have to solve a problem, or you have to rescue someone, or whatever else. And as a consequence of playing your characters, things happen that you don't expect. And the other thing that D&D has that a lot of games don't have is just the randomness of the dice. When you have to do something, you have some certain advantages if you're good at it, but just because you're a professional gymnast doesn't mean you're not going to fall on your butt every once in a while. Same thing with D&D. And as a consequence, there are times where a good roll or a bad roll can really change the direction of a story, and then you have to adapt to that, and you have to figure out a different way than just relying on your usual problem-solving skills to get around it. And last night, you can go listen to it. It's actually a really fun session. It's right here on the channel. One of the characters, we met his parents for the first time. It was a very classic, I don't want you guys to meet my parents, I'm so embarrassed. And we're like, oh, we want to meet your parents. Chrisiosity did a great job role-playing it of the proud parents and the embarrassed, child. And we were bringing up all the things that, we were bringing up kind of like rosy versions of things that Erasmus's character had done in the past, because he's actually a little bit of an F-up. He's occasionally messed things up for the party, but that's also his character. And so as a consequence, it was like we were sitting around reminiscing in character about the adventures of our character, and laughing together and making jokes, and it was just such a great experience. So yeah, 3 critical fails as an archer in the same battle. I calculated I did more damage to my teammates than the enemy. Oh, and the thing is, people will remember this. They will, and you won't live it down. When it comes to it. So yeah, it's I guess in some ways, maybe the most comparable thing I can think of is that if you see a movie with somebody that and both of you really enjoy the movie, you might make references to things that happen in the movie, and it becomes like a shared joke, or it's a shared joke with anyone who's had that experience, right? So it might be something like, like a line from the Avengers or from Monty Python or whatever else, and it becomes a little in-joke, that, yeah, with Minecraft, I'm sure. It could be the same thing, and that shared experience is something that makes you feel like a connection you have with a person. But in this case, you're the movie. Your adventure is the grand narrative, and your character is the hero, and their successes and their failures, and your team members' successes and your failures are shared between you and the dungeon master or mistress, and it's just like a special world that you share. And it's, I think, probably listening, unless someone else really likes D&D, listening to their characters, them tell their characters' adventures, is probably not that exciting. It would be for me, because I have empathy and I could put myself in the role of them playing that character. But for us, it's as great as any film. Like some of the jokes that get told, or some of the weird things that we never expected to happen. Just really quickly, and then I really will move on. Like in our game with R&D, which is also here on this channel, that was the Underdark. We went to a town and we bumped into some cultists that were trying to recruit us to the Church of Kronos. And offhandedly, Chrisiosity asked if they would have snacks there. I think it was Chrisiosity. And R&D wasn't expecting it because, he didn't have a snack table ready. He's like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, we'll have snacks. And it turns out it was going to be a trap. Turns out we really should not have gone to the church, and he kind of, R&D kind of tried to warn us off of it. We actually went and looked around it, and we were on our way out. We were leaving, and as we were leaving, the cultist arrived with snacks. And we looked at it and we said, well, are they good snacks? Because we were kind of hungry. And he rolled, and they were good snacks. So we decided to stay, and after they set up the snack table, we went back inside, started stuffing our faces, and ended up getting our butts kicked and having to run away. It was only because of the snacks. It was only because of one offhand comment from a character, and then an offhanded response from the DM, and then the DM's decision to kind of like, the timing of it when we were there. It was all a series of coincidences. We never should have gotten our butts kicked. Not only did we get our butts kicked, one of our characters got kidnapped. And then again, with the unpredictability of D&D, when our character was kidnapped, the two R&D and Micro ran a separate session to find out what happened. Turns out he had been turned or something, or made into a baddie, and they set up again, R&D tried to tell us it was a trap. Micro got a new character rolled up. We were going to kind of move on with things, but Chrisiosity was not having it. She's like, we're rescuing this character. We're rescuing a party member. We're not leaving anyone behind. And we went and tried to rescue the character. I'm trying to remember something of the I feel bad, I forgot it now, but and again, it was another trap, and we weren't meant to succeed, but she pulled out an anti-magic shield, and it totally turned the tide of the battle, and we rescued her. So it's that kind of stuff that's so much fun. Alright, so you say, your character is a hero, laughs, stealing villagers' crops and running away. Like, oh, see, I don't play that kind of character. I know back in the day it was big in D&D to pick everybody's pocket and break into everything. You're expected to at least have a thief that would try, but we have a pretty good-hearted series of characters, do-gooders, on a mission, who also kind of fix problems as they go. So I don't play in that kind of way. I kind of don't play my character in order to do things I wouldn't do in real life, other than like magic. I think I do it more as how do I put together spells and abilities I'm an optimizer. That I love utility characters. I don't mind being a tank, but I can't just be a tank. I can't just fight. I need to be able to heal or do control the battlefield spells, or something to do that. So I like to have multifaceted characters where I can do a lot, whether that's a high level bard or a cleric. I like playing a cleric. I don't know why people don't like playing clerics. I don't get that. But anyway, yes, we are a superstitious bunch. Gamers are a superstitious bunch. That was a Minecraft thing. Okay, got it. All right, so what I thought we would do today, and let me just have a little bit of coffee, because I was up till 3 in the morning, and then I was just so excited I didn't get to sleep till 4, and I only woke up an hour and a half ago. I wanted to look at the political compass, some of the political compass tests. Take a drink of coffee. My voice goes. I roll to seduce. Yes, when you're a bard. All right. Now, I didn't want to just take the political compass test because, you know, it's the thing that people have done in the past. I've worked on studies where we've had to construct a series of questions that actually measure a concept. And so I wanted to have a look at, actually, let's look at what the Wikipedia article says on it, because I'm interested in, people on the right will often take this and it will put them somewhere in the center or whatever else, and then they go, oh, see, I'm not a far right person. Okay, there's some dodgy stuff going on already. And as a consequence, I wanted to have a look at it, not to necessarily take it and answer it and think that it's an accurate measure. More along the lines of, I want to have a look at it because I think it's, I want to look at what they're trying to measure. I also want to look at the political spectrum that they've conceived. Because when you say there's a left-right economic axis, spectrum, then what economic policies are you putting on that spectrum? What is the dimension of economics? Are you comparing capitalism with communism? And if so, is there a place in there for democratic socialism or social democracy? Are those discrete categories, or do you see capitalism at one extreme and communism at the other? And if so, is that based on common ownership of means or what? So I think it's interesting. I thought it might be interesting for us to go through it because I want to look at it from the perspective of a political scientist, as opposed to a random on YouTube, a far right random on YouTube who is looking for some kind of political validation. And maybe I always have too many ideas and I never follow through with them. But maybe it would be interesting to do an alternative political compass that's actually based on measures that are clearly defined and put together and specified and cited, so that you know exactly what concepts are being measured. So the political compass is a website which uses responses to a set of 62 propositions to rate political ideology in a political spectrum with two axes, economic, left-right, and social, authoritarian, libertarian. The website does not reveal the people behind it. Ding, ding. Okay, already. Oh, shoot, you can't see anything. I need to transition. All right, now that we're over here. Bang. Here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, now you're all caught up. This is what I'm looking at. I've already read this part up here, and now I'm down to this part here. The website does not reveal the people behind it, beyond the fact that it seems to be based in the United Kingdom. At the bottom of any page of the website, it is stated that the copyright of the political compass, which is claimed as a trademark, belongs to an organization named Pace News Limited. Pace News Limited is a company registered in, that was a harsh sound, sorry about that, in New Zealand, whose director is political journalist Wayne Brittenden. According to the New York Times, the site is the work of Brittenden, and the site was connected to One World Action, a charity founded by Glenys Kinnock. Political model. The underlying theory of the political model used by the political compass is that political ideology may be better measured along two separate independent axes. The economic left-right axis measure one's opinion of how the economy should be run. Left is defined as the desire for the economy to be run by a cooperative collective agency, which can mean the state, but it can also mean a network of communes, while right is defined as the desire for the economy to be left to the devices of competing individuals and organizations. I think that that seems like a potentially a straw man way of organizing left-right. I mean, one thing that you could use as an alternative, which I've seen in the British election study and other British sociological studies, is the role of trade unions. Not so much like saying a collective ownership, but the role of trade unions in the economy. And also questions about the fairness of the distribution. Are you okay with some people living in poverty and other people having quite a lot of wealth? So already I'm like, okay. And the other axis, fly in my house, authoritarian libertarian measures one's political opinions in a social sense regarding the amount of personal freedom that one would allow. Libertarianism is defined as the belief that personal freedom should be maximized, while authoritarianism is defined as the belief that authority should be obeyed. A number of other multi-axis models of political thought exist, some based on similar axes to the political compass. What is this? I got little bug or something. Flew into my house. We don't have any screens on our windows here in Germany, so it is quite easy. If you just open up your windows, it's you and then it's just nature, like right there. Blah, blah, blah. I'm just wondering, the website does not explain its scoring system. See, already this is dodgy AF. A number of writers, including Tom Utley and Brian Patrick Mitchell, have criticized its validity. Yeah, I'm kind of getting that sense already. And also the fact that far-right people tend to take this in order to rescue themselves from the charges that they're far-right makes me think it's not a great metric. So I wanted to see if I can, I remember looking this up. It might be behind a paywall, though. Let's see. Libertarian, authoritarian, British. I don't know if I can election. I'll just try the British election study because I worked on that and I know their battery of questions. And FFS. How about British? Election study questionnaire. Let's just go with that. Okay. All right. Yeah, we can look at a PDF. Right. Here's the questionnaire wave. British election study 2015. That's, let's see, party ID, trust leader, racism amount, economic, let's see, oh, this is like, basically these are the names. Maybe it's just easier if I put in libertarian. Ah, yes, this looks like the battery we're looking at. So question, some people feel that in order to fight terrorism, we have to accept infringement on privacy and civil liberties. Others feel that privacy and civil liberties are to be protected at all costs. Where would you place yourself and the political parties on this scale? And what they then do is they provide them with a 10-point scale, well, 11-point scale, because it goes from 0 to 10. And then they have to say where they rank themselves relative to where they also feel the parties are. This helps you understand not only what the voters or the person doing the survey, where they stand, but also how their perspective influences the way that they perceive where the parties stand. So this looks like the kind of batteries. Oh, there's a lot of, so all right, this looks like the online version of it. So I'm not going to sit here and go over it because I haven't done that kind of work. But basically, they do a lot of thinking. They put a lot of thought into measuring, like creating the wording. What words you use will prime people. It might have an influence on how they respond to it. And then after they get the information, they'll run what's called factor analyses or other kinds of latent class analysis. And the idea of a latent class analysis is when you measure something. In the social sciences, we only want to measure one thing at a time. You don't want to measure multiple concepts in the same question because then you can't kind of pull apart what is what. Are you measuring one thing more than the other? Are you measuring them both equally? And so one of the ways that we check the validity of the questions we ask is we see whether or not people's answers load on what's called like a single factor. Or are there other factors underlying that question? And if you're interested, you can go into look at class analysis. It's a very useful diagnostic tool for construct validity, and it's used oftentimes in psychology, usually with confirmatory factor analysis or principal components analysis. But okay, let's take a look at this dodgy AF test. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to make this tough. There's no way you guys are gonna see this. So. All right. Please note this isn't a survey, and these aren't questions. They're propositions. What? I mean, what? Are you kidding me? All right. Okay. Already, like, all right, this is going to be crap, isn't it? This is going to be terrible, isn't it? All right. So let's see. Your responses should not be overthought. Some of them are intentionally vague. No. No, 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 no. This is how we can show you whether you lean towards extremism or moderation on the compass. Well, it's not just extremism. All right. Yeah. Your questions should never be left intentionally vague. Ever, 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 ever. Because then if you're forcing your respondents to interpret the meaning of your questions, as opposed to clearly narrowing in on the concept you're trying to measure, you won't know what their answers mean. Because we can't read people's minds. One of the other things that we do in the social sciences when we do survey questions is we do cognitive testing. So we will give, in an ideal world, if you had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, what you would do is you would take a question, if you're developing a question for the first time, and you would try to narrow it down to measuring a single concept. Now, that single concept might be like an either or, like, I strongly agree to strongly disagree within that one concept. And then you would do some focus groups with people, or in individual interviews. And you would give them the 5 questions and ask them to fill out, the 5 questions. Because the other thing is you want at least 3 different questions on one concept. In psychology, they have like 24 questions on 3 concepts. In the social sciences, during surveys, we can't do that. There's just not enough time. People wouldn't answer our surveys if every single concept we wanted to measure was 24 questions. So you need like 3 to 5. 5 is really, 7 would be amazing. If you had 7 questions on the same concept, people would probably think that's a bit excessive. 5 is ideal. So something on like libertarian authoritarianism, if you could have 5 to 7 questions, you're going to have to balance other places in the questionnaire because people just won't answer all these questions. But 3 is really the minimum. You can't reliably measure a really complicated concept with just one question. But so you take your 3 questions or your 5 questions or your 7 questions, and you would give them to just ordinary people who aren't political scientists, aren't social scientists, don't have all the stuff in your head that you have. And you'd ask them to fill it out and then go over their answers, saying, when you read this question, what were you thinking about when you answered it? What things came to mind? What did it mean to you? What did these words mean to you? And then when you look at the response options, how did you decide to answer the way you did? And the idea is if you ask a lot of people, you might get feedback you weren't expecting. People might be making associations or making references or interpreting the wording of your question in ways that you hadn't intended. So those cognitive interviewing phase of survey design is quite important to bridge the gap between the professionals we live in a little bit of a bubble. As a political scientist, I think of education as a political issue. But your average person on the street might think of education as a public service. But because I think about it in terms of funding and contestation of content and structure, I would put it down as something I would assume other people would think is political too. And those cognitive interviews are really good for checking our understanding to get us out of the ivory tower a little bit and see whether or not the questions we're writing are interpreted by the average person the way that we think they are. And if they're not, what can we take from those answers to shape the question to better get at the concept we want to get at? Okay, so, oh God. The other thing you don't want to, oh my God, it's like 101 how not to write a survey. Okay, so first of all, yeah, you don't have vague questions. I'm already like, all right, this is garbage. Like, maybe I'll be proven wrong as we go along. I'm looking at the first question. I'm already seeing, I'm just going to explain why it's garbage. Maybe this isn't interesting to y'all, but this is my perspective looking at it from someone. I had to design, my thesis was designed or was built on wording for questions that I had to, adapt and put in. So I have a little bit of experience with this. Let's see. They shouldn't be vague. The purpose is to trigger reactions in the mind measuring feelings and prejudices rather than detailed opinions on policy. Okay. Feelings. I guess, when we look at the quantification of feeling in political science, what we tend to measure are, I would say, two things. We give people thermometer questions of warmth and coldness. So we might ask someone about a politician and like, how warmly do you feel or how cold do you feel to this person? Like when I see Donald Trump, I would put a 0. When I see Joe Biden, I'd probably put like a 70 or 75. And so the movement back and forth, that's what you're trying, and you're trying to get people to quantify those things. The other thing we do ask about is, we will say, when you think about NHS policy or when you think about whatever in America, which of the following emotions are accurately describing what you feel when those words are said? And it could be confident, fearful, angry, happy, proud, and a series of emotions. And we don't give people the opportunity to just pick one. You might be both proud of the NHS and very angry at the way that it's been run. You might be quite fearful as to its future. And so the idea there is to try to see whether or not people's emotions tend to cluster, or there's a more popular answer, because people are complicated and emotions are complicated. So measuring feelings, strongly agree to strongly disagree, that just tells you agreement. Strongly agree to strongly disagree just tells you how much you agree with a statement. And that's not a feeling measure. It's an agreement measure. So I'm also going to point that out. Measuring prejudices. You don't tell people you're trying to measure their prejudices. If you tell people, especially like in this situation, that you're going to measure their prejudices, they are now immediately in mind that they should not be a prejudiced person. Because it's called social desirability. People, especially when they give answers to another person, it's less so, we think, and not with anonymous online responses, but in an in-person interview situation, if you say something like, I'm going to measure your prejudices, people are like, oh, I don't want to be considered prejudiced? Okay, well, I'm going to give the answers that I think are appropriate. Or I'm going to modify my answers in a way to make them appear more appropriate. So what we try to do instead when we want to get at prejudices is we ask indirectly about a topic. So I think one of the questions used in the British election study is efforts to expand women candidates and BME, but now BMAE candidates has gone too far, is about right, or not far enough. Right. So in that case, you have a choice. Do you think that measures to try to broaden out the kinds of candidates that stand for office, if you think it's gone too far, and there are like 4 BME or BMAE candidates in your party, and your party is one of the major parties, you're probably a little bit biased. And we don't actually just ask about prejudices, because that immediately taints people's responses. It's interesting to hear an academic view. I'm glad. I'm glad. That's kind of why I thought it would be worth it. And maybe I can go over and challenge some of the people on the right to take an actual political compass test. But that seems like a lot of work. I have more good ideas than I have time to implement them, or will. The other thing I want to say is that this is a 4-point scale, not a 5-point scale. So just looking at the response options, I am given strongly agree, disagree. The options you get are strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree. So what they're missing is the median category. They're missing neither agree nor disagree. And they don't have a don't know option. So this is, let me get comfortable. I didn't realize I'm going to be talking this much about this crappy test yet. But yeah, you're kind of getting like Introduction to Survey Questionnaires 101 for free. You could go to the University of Essex Summer School and pay money for this, or you could just show up to my channel and listen to me rant while I have a little bit of coffee. Speaking of coffee. All right. The median category and the inclusion and the decision whether or not to include don't know as a response. These are very tactical questions that you have to reflect on. Now, that being said, if you are reusing questions from a prior study like a long-running study, like the British Sociological, the BSA study, or the crime survey, or the crime study, or the British election study, you're a little bit trapped in replicating the exact wording and the exact response options that were administered in that series. And that is because we in the social sciences we understand the concept of replication. If you want to be able to compare like with like, you have to give the exact same stimulus, and you have to provide people with the exact same response options. If one study has only a 4-point scale, like the strongly agree to strongly disagree, and another one has a 5-point scale, which includes neither agree nor disagree, then immediately you're presented with an analysis problem when you have some people who have a 4-point scale and other people who have a 5-point scale. How do you rectify these? Because if you start, let's say, I'll just throw out the 3s in the one study, well, now you're losing responses. And so you're not comparing, you're sort of like selecting out people who have the strongest opinions when they were given an option to either hide in the median category, we'll talk about that in a second hopefully, or are genuinely ambivalent, like they genuinely don't know. And so that is why we have to perfectly replicate question wording from over time. And that is also a reason why I tend to look at the aggregated survey, when they do the aggregated poll of polls on 538.com. I'm like, yeah, it kind of measures it. I mean, when you say Trump support and Biden support, and you're putting together all of the polls, you're getting the general sentiment, but you're not comparing. Not all of these polling companies use the same wording, in which case they're not really comparing the same level of support. There's also a good case to be made that when you poll registered voters, that's a different kind of voter than likely voters. And that's a completely different category from all adults. So I see the poll of polls as more like a fuzzy category. It's supposed to get rid of the margin of error, but in some ways it makes the concept less fuzzy or less precise. And here, when you're eliminating the middle category, the 3 category of neither agree nor disagree, you're eliminating you're eliminating something for the respondent. So one, you're forcing them to take a position. In this case, if I'm presented with a question and I'm genuinely ambivalent about it, I really don't know, and you force people into agree or disagree, you're forcing them into opinion they might not have. Right? And then there's a consequence. You're creating support or you're creating dissent. You're not measuring it. The other thing about the 3 category is linked to the don't know option. So these questions aren't offering you, I don't know. I honestly don't know. There are advantages and disadvantages to including don't know as an option. Now, the advantages are, sometimes people don't have an opinion on something. I mean, just because you care about it as a political scientist doesn't mean everybody in the world cares about it. So when you get your responses back, do you want the responses of everybody that you surveyed, or do you want the responses of people who feel like they know what they're talking about? Do you want people to self-select out if they don't have an opinion, rather than forcing them to create an opinion that you then treat as real? That's a measurement question. It's not an easy one. There's not a right answer. These are just things we have to wrestle with as social scientists. The downside of I don't know is that people can be lazy. People can just not put in the cognitive effort to think about a question enough to decide whether, oh, actually I hadn't thought about this, but now that I think about it, they reflexively might go, I don't know. There's also more of an issue, and generally, like, giving opinions isn't so much of a problem. Where the don't know option has more opportunity to distort the responses is in like political knowledge tests. Sometimes in a survey, a political science survey, we will want to ask people basic things that we think somebody who is informed about politics should know. Like, is the minimum voting age in Britain 16? people who know politics should be able to say, no, it's 18. And other basic questions. The thing about that is, one, people don't like taking tests. They don't mind answering surveys and giving their opinions. And so you see sometimes a lot of drop off. But the other thing is, if you ask more obscure questions, women generally, as a group, if they don't feel like they know an answer, they will say they don't know. They have a propensity to just reply with don't know if they don't feel confident. Men in the aggregate will just guess. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're wrong. But as a consequence, because of the way that we weight those responses, it looks like women know less than about politics than men do. When the fact is, and this is my own research that I did with Rosie Campbell, looking at this when we asked people about their interest in politics, by phrasing interest in politics differently. We asked about how interested are you in these topics. That women are actually quite interested in a lot of issues, education, NHS, elderly care, that people don't associate with politics. They don't associate it with like partisan politics. They associate partisan politics with, people shouting at each other and in policy disputes and things like that. So women, at least the last time I looked at the literature, are more likely to say don't know. And so if you offer don't know as a question, in certain circumstances, you might be skewing the responses slightly by having those women who are willing to say don't know pick that option, and then men just making a guess. And they didn't actually know, they just happened to get it right. The last thing about don't knows is they're not data. If you offer your respondents a don't know option, that basically is them opting out of giving you data for that question, because you can't do anything with don't know. You can do something with strongly agree. You can do something with strongly disagree. But if you have like half of your respondents say don't know, you really need to look at the respondents who did and question whether or not, I think that doesn't really happen, to be honest. Usually don't knows run about, 2 to 7% kind of thing. But if people are self-selecting out of your question, a great deal of people don't understand it or don't know about it because you're asking about something outside of their worldview. The kinds of people who are answering it are slightly different from the general population. So offering a don't know, I can see why you would not offer someone a don't know question if you offer them that median category. All right, let's talk about the threes. A colleague of mine, Rob Johns at Essex, did his PhD on what do people who say neither agree nor disagree, what do they really mean? What does it mean to say you neither agree or disagree when you've got something on, like the trade unions or whatever else? He found in his work that people who answer in that median, I'll just call it the median category, are actually two groups of people. The first group of people, if you have those who, it's a propensity for those with a higher education or a more specialized knowledge of the topic. If they are genuinely ambivalent, if they are genuinely torn, like I don't know, I don't strongly or even agree. I'm like I don't know. I feel complicated. It's complicated, right? In this situation, this question, they will pick three because they don't. They're lukewarm. They can't pick a side. If you don't offer a don't know option on your question, people who don't know will hide in the threes. They'll go, I don't know, I neither agree nor disagree. They use that as their replacement for don't know. And so sometimes people will take out threes in their analysis because they're not quite, it depends too on like the distribution. If you get a lot of people in the threes, you don't want to see that. Usually you want to see more responses in the, agree or disagree. If you're asking a question, you're kind of assuming there's there's patterns in there. And if you've got a bunch in the middle, it might show a problem with your question. So in this case, I didn't expect to go so long on just the question wording. You can do an entire course on question wording. You can do an entire week of looking at the psychology that's gone into the kinds of words that use, the order of the questions, the type of response options, the wording of the response options, and then we'll talk about directionality of the response options after this. And so yeah, basically they're forcing people here to they're creating opinions. And they're not manufacturing consent, but they are, by forcing people to either agree or disagree, you're not getting an accurate statement. You're forcing people to take a side. And maybe for whatever reason you want to push your respondents to pick a side on this. But then you have to also understand it's not an accurate metric of what people really think, because you've now forced them to pick a side. The last thing I want to talk about is the direction of the response options. In surveys, one of the things that people will do in order to kind of like make a shortcut is, well, they'll get used to answering certain things in a certain way, right? Especially on the computer. And if you always have strongly agree, agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree, strongly disagree, if you list your response options in that way across your survey, we know empirically people will tend to agree more than they disagree. There will be a weight toward the sort of the primacy of what is listed first. Conversely, if you start all of the response options with strongly disagree, disagree, and then you move on to strong agreement, if you have the reversed wording of the question and you flip that, you will then get more disagreement. One of the things that people do to change this up or to stop this tendency of I can't remember the name of the effect. It's like an agreement effect or something like that, is to word questions in such a way that people should, if you have a consistent idea in your mind, you should agree with one statement and disagree with another. If you remember back, I told you that you need at least 3 metrics in most social surveys to start to measure a concept, ideally 5. A professional survey company will not ask those questions in a way that you have to agree with all of them. They will word it such that if you are actually paying attention and you truly hold these views, you might answer agree, disagree, agree, or disagree, disagree, agree, or whatever combination. This makes sure that the respondents are actually reading the question and not just going click, 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 click. And it also is a way to prevent them from just going, yeah, I agree, yeah, I agree, yeah, I agree, yeah, I agree, because that tendency will skew responses. And I already see, I'm not sure how far down we'll get, but I already seeing that there's a lot of strong disagree, which makes me think that most of the answers here are going to skew toward the disagreement. If we kind of that one, like strong disagree is 1, and then disagree is 2, agree is 3, and strongly agree is 4, the mean of the responses given are going to be lower than the average because of the way that the responses are offered. All right. Am I still streaming? Are people stop talking? I don't know if y'all are just listening now or whatever. I'm not being very... Yeah, we seem to still be going live. I think I'm still streaming. Oh, okay. No. Oh, 19 people. Hey, guys. How y'all doing? All right. We've been talking about this for a long time. We haven't even got to the test yet. Oh, Christy, you do go on a bit. All right. Okay. Just a few propositions to start with, concerning no less how you see the country, and the world. Okay. Oh, you're all listening. All right, thanks. Just checking in. Okay, well, immediately, I have some questions because national values on economics differ by country. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. If you don't know what country people reside in while answering this question, it's going to, again, skew the responses or at least make them unreliable. And that's because people in the UK, for instance, have a much more warm view. If you were to ask a British population, do you think that we should increase taxes and increase services, keep taxes and service funding about the same, or decrease taxes and decrease public services? On average, the British population is much more in favor of raising taxes and increasing services than Americans are. I mean, there has been some change over time. Back in the 70s, you used to see a lot more support, so there is a little bit of shift. But generally, Europeans are less hostile to the idea of taxation and redistribution. So if you don't know that and you're comparing, you're just putting everybody's answers into a pot, you're not able to disambiguate those countries where, let's say, free market capitalism is more normatively acceptable or even like, promoted or desirable. So, problems. If economic, all right, then let's look at the wording of the question. I didn't even get, I thought, we're not even going to do the survey. It's just going to be a whole day on why this is a crap survey. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Okay, there's a normative thing here, right? Why would anyone agree that economic globalization should serve the interest of transnational corporations? Like, is it reasonable that there is a population, a measurable, significant population out there that says, yeah, globalization should benefit corporations? Even people who are pro-capitalism criticize things like the monopoly of Twitter because they're not allowed to be racist on it, or vulture capitalism, or corporatism. So if this just seems like a straw man argument, what you're basically saying here is, globalization should serve the super rich and not humanity. And humanity itself is a very loaded term. This isn't workers versus shareholders. This is all of humanity versus transnational corporations. So it's crap. I'm going to say agree. I'm going to say strongly agree. Because I don't take this at all seriously. I'm just interested to see what it takes to actually be right-wing on this test. All right. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. This is actually a question. This is, I think, a question I have seen on some surveys. But I'm trying to remember what concept it's measuring. I think we don't really have patriotism metrics. It might be a nationalism. Let me see what other political compass, Facebook. All right, yeah, let's have a look at this. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. On average, people on TruePublic are neutral. See, they offer a median category on this statement. On average, people on TruePublic are neutral towards the following statement: I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. I'm not at all surprised that men are more likely to agree with that statement, although it's only a 6% difference. So generally, most people, of course, they have the binary cis. I'm sorry, that's just like historically how people have done measurement in social surveys. But you can see that what we say, this is a skew. This is a metric that skews, and it's fine if that's what the views are in the population. You don't always need, a bivariate one, but generally, this is, you would expect here that, it's 60 some percent. Is that 65% of respondents are going to say disagree? So, that's fine. And you might be interested in this 7 and 12%. You might really want to look at their views. Like, who are the people that would support their country, right or wrong? So, I'm going to go ahead and say strongly agree. Let's see what it takes. Let's see what it takes to actually end up as a right-winger on this. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. Normative, there are value judgments going on in here. You're not just saying, that's not a reason to be proud of it. So, no one chooses his or her country of birth, so it doesn't make sense to be proud of it based on that. You're basically saying, patriotism is foolishness. Which, again, that's not a very well worded question. Strongly disagree. It's not foolish to be proud of your country just because. Again, I don't care about these answers. Oh. All right. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. All right. There are so many problems I can already identify with this question. First is social desirability. People, even racist people, even white supremacists, will try to cover their, white nationalists will try to cover themselves by saying, look, you know, black people can be proud. There's black pride. Black people can be proud of their race. I'm just proud of my race. And so you can say, you know, it's not that I'm racially superior. It's just that I am proud of my race, despite whatever our qualities are. And the other thing too is, unless they ask whose ethnicity it is, they're just dumping all of these questions in to a big pot. And so you're not kind of like, are they a member of the majority group? Are they a member of the minority group, or a minority group in this country? All right, I'm having a hard time agreeing with that one. So I'm going to say disagree, but only slightly. The enemy of my enemy is my friend? Sorry, but WTF is this meant to measure? If the whole idea is libertarian, authoritarian, and capitalism versus communism, how is the enemy of my enemy is my friend a question? That's just a tactical question. That's not a political value question. What the hell is this question doing in here? I'm going to say strongly agree. I honestly don't even know what that's meant to measure. I have no idea. I have no idea what the purpose of that is meant to be. It's really annoying here. Okay. Because when I try to scroll down, I end up changing my answer. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. All right, you've already put in defy international law. So that's priming people to say disagree. And is sometimes justified. Like, perhaps if there was a context for this, like there was a country that was engaged in this, but honestly, military action that defies international law is sometimes justified is such a pointless question without context. So what people are going to say is, oh, I disagree. Because in the abstract, people will, you know, take a socially desirable position, but then when they're actually confronted with it, they'll rationalize why it's okay that they do it. Like, military action that defies international law could be the United States deciding to do something without the approval of the UN. Now, a lot of war hawks might say, oh, no, that's, you know, military action defying international law. Also, international law. What does it mean to defy international law? Does that mean human rights violations? Does that mean going against a UN resolution? This question is utterly meaningless. It's utterly meaningless. You're just saying, should, you know, like, military action always, you know, like, be done appropriately? Who's going to say no to this? Honestly. All right, so I'm just going to say strongly agree. Because it's not my true view. I'm just trying to get a right-wing answer here. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. What? What? What does that have to do with the left-right scale? What does that have to do with the left-right? That has nothing to do with the left-right scale, with any left-right scale. That's just an opinion. All right. If I keep going, we're never going to get through this, so I'm just going to try to be quicker in explaining why these questions are meaningless and garbage and giving fake answers to see if I can actually show up as a right wing. People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. Oh, now the economy. We're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. All right, I guess it's an American framing, but people are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. I guess this is a measure of the group, a very small portion of the population who might have a class, you know, it's class analysis. It is such a small proportion of the country, of countries. The number of people who actually like think in terms of class terms more than patriotism is minuscule. So how should I answer this? What is the right-wing answer on this? People, we strongly disagree, right? They would be nationalists. So people are ultimately divided more by class than by nationalism. Strongly disagree. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. All right, this is a question that has been asked as a metric. And this one is really a kind of a weird question to be asking in the 2000s. This comes, I'm pretty sure this has been asked in the British election study, because in the 1970s, when a lot of surveys were being established or started, they started in the 60s and then they were being expanded in the 70s, inflation was a huge issue. And people haven't really had to worry about inflation for a very long time now. And also the link between inflation and, yep, here we go. They had to balance, the issue was high unemployment and high inflation. So what problems, do you deal with? Do you try to control inflation that might have knock-on effects to unemployment, or do you try to get unemployment under control and then deal with inflation? I don't think people today really consider either of those concepts a big threat. But again, let's try to get a right-wing response. Controlling inflation. Yeah, we're going to think that people are less important than money, right? That's the idea we're trying to measure here. So we're going to say, yes, strongly agree that controlling inflation should be more important. All right. At least when they're stealing other people's questions, they do get the, to be consistent, you should answer different ways. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. All right. That's actually I think this is a pretty straightforward question. And I'm going to disagree with that. I mean, it's part of the problem with this question, I'll tell you, is it's asking two things. I mean, it's saying because corporations can't be trusted, you could say, I strongly disagree that corporations can't be trusted. Or you could say, okay, they can't be trusted, and I think they require regulation. So where the disagreement in that question is, I mean, it's supposed to be because, if then, but still, I don't think that's a great worded question. But we're going to disagree with that because we're trying to see if we get it right way. This is annoying. From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. How would a capitalist? I guess they would say disagree because of need, right? It just shouldn't matter what your needs are. It should only matter what your ability is. I mean, I guess it's basically a measure of communism, but the principle itself is not that offensive. The idea of abilities and needs, like people should have their needs met and people, but okay, we're going to strongly disagree. The freer the market, the freer the people. Yep, we're going to say yes to that. Although what is meant by market, who knows? It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I don't think this is a capitalism measure, but okay. We're going to strongly disagree. But there's yeah, I'm not even going to try to get behind all of these. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought or sold. This is so from a capitalist point of view, you would strongly disagree. Land should be bought and sold. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to society. Okay. Let's see. I guess in this case, like again, there are things in here you could disagree with. That is, do you disagree that it's regrettable? Do you disagree that people do this? But we're going to say strongly disagree. I think the meaning of that is we shouldn't be regretting. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. This again seems like a question out of time. What is the communist perception? Like, if you want to take a communist versus capitalism dimension, what is the communist perspective on this? Because if you're dealing with workers, you should see all workers the same. So protectionism shouldn't be an issue. It just feels like a question from the 1970s when people were talking about tariffs and trade barriers and things. But a free marketeer would say strongly disagree. You shouldn't have any protectionism. This is one of those questions where like a right-winger could say yes, because they would be pro-capitalist, but they'd also at the same time want to be they think they're for free capitalism, but they also want to protect their local workers. And I'm being a centrist by taking these two positions when actually all I'm doing is having a cognitive dissonance. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Right? This requires people to actually understand like quite a lot about how corporations work and what a shareholder is. I think Americans would probably have a bit more. The general American is going to have a bit more experience with this because so many of people's pensions and retirement funds are tied up in the stock market. So social responsibility, I don't understand why social responsibility is put in there. Social responsibility means to society. For instance, like corporate social responsibility, where they try to give fair trade things to coffee bean growers when they're a coffee company. So social responsibility for me makes no sense because what they're saying is the only responsibility of a company. So adding social in there now changes the meaning of the question. But trying to be consistently capitalist, we're going to say strongly agree. We're going to have really intense feelings this whole time to see if we can finally get it right. The rich are taxed too highly taxed. This changes by country. This is so without yeah, you guys already know. I strongly agree. No, I don't. Just pretending here. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. All right, there's a normative issue here, which more people would say, "Oh, that's wrong." But then again, this is it's kind of a weird question because we don't have tiered insurance as really in the way that they have like here in Germany. If you have a job or you're self-employed, there are 5 different companies with sort of 5 different plans or combinations of plans internally, and you can go to any of those 5 companies and see what they offer in terms of their health insurance, and then you sign up for that particular kind of health insurance. And it's the same it means I can go to any doctor and hand over my insurance card because all doctors accept all forms of insurance. When you reach a certain pay threshold, which I reached this year actually, or last year, you can then go to different sets of insurance and pay more to be topped up. So if I were to decide for some reason that I wanted to get a more expensive insurance plan, I can now go and sign up for that. And as a consequence, I might get, a nicer room, or I might get like a physical therapy covered more than I don't really know because I didn't sign up for it because it's not important to me. But I think here you're going to get normative responses rather than actually an analysis, and it being a question that's just on the internet. People in America are going to have a very different framework for understanding what this means than people in Germany. So, and also higher standards of medical care. You don't get necessarily higher standards of medical care here by paying more for insurance. You get a nicer room, or you get whatever. You get nicer things, but you don't get bumped up on a waiting list, as far as as far as I've ever heard. So this again, garbage question. But we're going to just say strongly agree because this question is meaningless. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Who would disagree with that? This isn't a communism metric. This is a pro-government regulation, anti-government regulation metric. But let's just say strongly disagree. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead. I want to also mention, I'm not only disagreeing, I'm doing an intensity disagreement. So the other thing I didn't mention about how social scientists think about this, the wording of this is, if you have someone who agrees and someone who strongly agrees, the strongly agree is an intensifying modifier. So I'm not going to trust, but I would predict that strongly disagree kind of gives you more points in one direction than just a disagree. because a disagree is kind of like a meh in this, where strongly disagree should be worth more. So if I were coding this to plot it, I would maybe make, I would make strongly disagree, like I would keep it as a -2, and a disagree as a -1, agree as a 1, and a strongly agree as a +1. And that way people's answers would be weighted, it would be kind of like a weight added in there in order to more accurately pull out those who are more extreme from those who are a bit more moderate. All right. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Holy crap. This requires so much information just to... Wow. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the abilities of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Okay. I'm just going to skip... this is going to take forever. I hadn't planned on it going this long. So I am going to strongly agree. No, I'm going to strongly disagree. Wait, what would the capitalist say here? What would a free, like an extreme free market capitalist say here? Because if I'm LARPing as a capitalist, monopolies are actually bad, right? Monopolies are a distortion of the market because they eliminate competition, and in theory, capitalism is successful because individuals or groups can compete with products, with better products, or with newer products, newer technologies, in a fair system. Whereas a monopoly, like Microsoft buying up TikTok, is just eliminating the competition so it can set prices. On the other hand, governments messing around in the free market, that's bad. So do I want governments to artificially structure the market in such a way to prevent a successful company from being as successful as it could be, like an Amazon or a Google or a Microsoft, right? One could make the argument that they are dominant because they are successful. But on the other hand, you could say they're a monopoly and therefore distorting the market. Okay, Stripe Mongoose says all restrictions and regulation are bad. Okay, we're going to go with that. Any regulation is bad. All right, that seems good. I've put way more thought into the questions than they have. I am also, have I been going like an hour? I have. Damn, girl, you can talk. I can tell how long I've been going in some ways because I have an internal clock and also how cold my coffee is. So we're going to go to the next page. We're going to have to get this going. But I do want to warm up my coffee. So since we've been doing an hour 10, let's take a break. We're going to come back. Okay, we're going to get through these last 3 pages, and then we're going to wrap it up. And I hope that by listening to this, you've been learning a lot and finding it interesting and feel better equipped to evaluate survey questions that you respond to. All right. Yes, let's come back in however long it takes me to make a coffee and stretch my legs. All right, see you all in a minute. Oh, wait, you know what? I have to turn up the volume on the music. Let's do that. Oh, that's it. Okay, see y'all in a bit. am back. Are y'all back too? We all got our whatever we need, given the time of day it is. I don't know how it is. I guess in the southern continents, or the southern hemisphere, it's cooler, but it is hot. It has been hot. I'm not that bothered by the heat. I enjoy the heat. That's only 28 degrees, so it's not quite 90 yet. It's supposed to get to 36 though today. So yeah, I would definitely do well in Arizona and some other places if I move back to the States, because I have like poor circulation in my feet. My feet are always cold. My feet are always cold. And the only time they're not is like when it's 30 degrees. All right. Not that you need to know that about me. There's a random fact about me you didn't need to know, but now you do. All right. Now we're going to go on to personal social values. All right. Abortion when the woman's life is not threatened should always be illegal. Do you guys, I mean, I don't know if you're starting to see what the things I'm seeing. Oh, I'm going to turn my camera a little bit there. Yeah, a little bit there. Dear he. I've been practicing that central Wisconsin accent, or that Wisconsin accent, you know, for my D&D game. That was a lot of fun there. What if you think even if the woman's life is in danger, you shouldn't allow abortion? You'd strongly disagree, wouldn't you? But this is ultimate. This isn't a metric of the support for abortion rights. This is really prompting people to answer agree. Right? So I'm going to say we're going to take a strong pro-life position and say even the health or the life of the mother. Well, in this case, I didn't even say the woman's health, just her life, the most extreme case. I have a feeling that this is from a battery of questions about abortion that say abortion should be, illegal in these circumstances or whatever else. I'm just guessing here. But we're going to say strongly disagree, because we're going to take the position of a far-righter who thinks, hey, you know, even if the woman's life is at stake, it's 2 equal lives. So, again, I don't believe these things. All authority should be questioned? Who says no to that? Like, who is such a complete, like, submissive person that they think that no authority should be questioned? The problem, like, if I saw this, if this was a question that someone offered to me in a survey, I would just ask, what's the use of this? My assumption on this is that this answer is going to be so skewed to agree as to be meaningless. It's almost like a waste of a question space on a questionnaire. And the kinds of people who are going to answer strongly disagree that all authority should be questioned, did they misread the question? What? So I'm going to say strongly disagree, just to be contrarian. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What is this supposed to be measuring? For a Christian, they should say no. People who follow Jesus should say no, because he said specifically, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, it's better to turn the other cheek, or whatever. So do you go Hebrew scriptures here, or do you go Christians, the Christian scriptures? And what is this supposed to be? Personal values? Some of your personal social values. Well, just because you think that personally doesn't necessarily mean, all right. Yeah. Let's go, we're going to stay like hardcore fundy Christian. So we'll say, yeah, strongly agree. I have no idea what this is supposed to be measuring. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up? There's a normative term. You're already basically saying, it's not subsidized. Any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Okay. Strongly agree. Let the free market decide. No role for the public. So anyway, that's probably what it's meant to say. Although I don't like the idea of prop up. Prop up primes people to think of wasted money. So in that case, you're kind of skewing people over to thinking it's a waste of money. A more neutral way of saying this is taxpayers should, or the government should not fund with subsidies theaters and museums that can't survive on a social basis. Because taxpayers expected and prop up, all of these words are priming a lot. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory for 4-year-olds, for 18-year-olds. I'm so confused. I am so confused. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I'm flummoxed. I am I've never, okay. I'm gonna say, should not, so if I say schools should not make it compulsory and I disagree, that means I agree they should make it compulsory. So to say schools should not make attendance compulsory, I agree with that statement. Okay, not really. We're just giving fake answers. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. I'm interested. Let's see if they can find out where, is this a question taken from an actual survey somewhere? I mean, if so, I'd like to see the battery. Quora, Political Compass. People should stick with their own kind. All right. Since the post on anti-miscegenation laws got a lot of attention, I was curious about analogs in the World Values Survey. There are 2 such questions of interest. Important for successful marriage, same ethnic background. Important for successful marriage, religious beliefs. These data are skewed toward European nations. The first, below the fold, data are presented to assert the same ethnic background is not very important, or that the same religious beliefs are not very important. I will admit the international... Where is the question wording, though? I don't see the question wording. I don't... So, let's see. I mean, I know the World Values Survey. It's one of the surveys that, like, I know people who work on the World Values Survey. But that's not how the question is worded, that I know of, or at least, same religion, not very important. Same ethnic background, not very important. But this whole either their own kind. Yeah, I'm not quite sure where this question wording came from. I have a lot of problems with it. Honestly, even on this fake test, I can't say this, so I'm just gonna say, I disagree. I mean, there are times I can LARP as a capitalist, but I can't actually put that answer. Disagree. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. There are gonna be cohort effects on this. Older people, I would assume, are going to be more likely to agree with that than younger people. But I don't see what it has to do with the left-right scale. I just don't. Like, this isn't a left-right scale test. What I've learned from taking the political compass test is that, in the main, it doesn't measure your authoritarianism or libertarianism, nor does it measure your capitalism or communist tendencies. This isn't a left-right scale test. It's just not. I'm going to say disagree. Again, there are more questions, I just can't. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. The fuck? What is it? Wait, what does this have to do with left-right? I thought this was a left-right test. People were telling me their scores on this, based on it being a left-right test. Unless they exclude these answers and put them into a different section, I don't know how anyone can say this contributes to a left-right scale. I'm going to say strongly disagree, because it's a meaningless question, so I'm going to give a meaningless answer. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I guess this is a libertarian measure, but it's not a libertarian authoritarian measure. If you see, so, all right, on a left-right libertarian authoritarian scale, it generally has to do with giving up rights versus having extreme rights. And this one is it's more of a, it's like the America, yeah. I'm just gonna stop. I'm gonna say strongly agree. I don't know what the capitalists, I guess the capitalists would think everyone should be able to buy marijuana. But the thing is here, it says possessing marijuana, but it's not talking about legalizing marijuana. That to me seems like a better measure for libertarian versus authoritarian, or if you want to, but even then, it's like government involvement versus not government involvement. Authoritarianism is giving up your rights in order to protect yourself from terrorism, or having censorship of adult materials in order to protect children from adult material content, or limiting protests or something like that. But it's not about the possession of marijuana. This is such a garbage test. All right. The prime function of schooling should be to equip future generations to get a job. Okay, sure. I'm sure this is the whole, but it's schooling, not university. So I think there are, we're just gonna strongly agree. The marijuana question is definitely not a lib-author question. The heads of North Korea army are constantly baked and they are authoritarian. Yeah, I mean, the dimensionality, these concepts. So as I told you before, the idea of a battery of questions is to get at one concept, or a pole, like a pole, a spectrum on a concept. So are you in the main against general government regulation at the and expanding individual freedom, even if there are some negative consequences? Or do you say that for the good of society, some of us have to give up some of our rights in order to be more secure, or to protect our children? That's the pole that you're looking at. And just having possession of marijuana, especially as places legalize marijuana, becomes less of a relevant question. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. This is pushing people into a direction. The social desirability on this question is massive. The actual number of people who would say, I strongly agree with this, would be so minuscule as to not even bother answering the question unless you have a specific, question in mind. And I don't even know what would warrant it. So again, I'm going to say I can't answer moral questions, and plus people could screen cap my answers and make me look bad. So I am considering the social desirability. So Pandis Rex, yeah, so Pandinus Rex, we talked earlier in the first part of the show about the fact that there is no third category of neither agree nor disagree, and there's also no don't know option. There's a whole discussion about that if you go back. But the short answer is, yeah, they're forcing people to take positions, and so they're not measuring opinions, they're creating them. So I'm going to say strongly disagree because, again, I just can't lie on these moral questions. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. This isn't a measure of economics. Okay. Sure. Let's say strongly, we're gonna fake this one. Strongly agree. It's a meaningless test. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. Wording wise, again, this is I think it kind of primes people because you're using the term savages, which, it pushes people. If you say you disagree with this, then you're implicitly admitting that you think people are savages, and there's a lot of levels of denial with racism that allow people to think they actually aren't as racist as they are. But in this case, I'll just say I strongly agree that there are only different cultures. I mean, you can get out the Tommy Robinson types and Carl Benjamin types who will preach cultural superiority, but generally, people won't admit to that kind of unacceptable view. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. Okay, there's a whole lot of assumptions going on there. They're able to work and refuse the opportunity, so you're priming people to say it's their fault. You're not actually looking at support systems and how the various conditions on unemployment. For instance, in the United States, if you apply for a job and you're offered a job and you don't take it, you lose your unemployment benefit. So what are you asking here? I mean, is this just lording over people? But as the pro-capitalist, we're going to say strongly agree, because we're LARPing as somebody we're not. When you are troubled, it is better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. This is a question from psychology. And I don't know what it is doing in a left-right. I didn't realize how utter crap this test was. And no wonder a bunch of far-right white supremacists can LARP as moderates and centrists based on this test. It's not measuring left-right. It's just not. This is not a left-right question. On what scale is this a left-right question? Politically. This is a psychological question about how you deal with stress. Your outlook toward the world. Your optimism, pessimism scale, maybe. So yeah, we're just going to strongly agree with that. I honestly can't. I don't know what I'm trying to LARP here, as a capitalist. First-generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. Okay, so we get some xenophobia in there. I'm just going to say disagree. I can't, again, for reasons politically that people would come and screen cap this and me answering in certain ways. And also I'm a first-generation immigrant myself. So what's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. There's so many elements here that could be measured, and it's really still not about free market versus, have you guys seen much other than each according to his ability and each according to his need, anything about trade unions or workers' rights or anything that really deals with the left side of the political spectrum? All right, we're just going to say strongly agree because we're faking stuff. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Okay. I guess this is probably a question taken from a British survey. I'm unaware. I guess there's a PBS. It could be an American one. And I guess there are publicly funded things in other countries, but it just seems like it's kind of a dumb one. All right, but we're going to say we're LARPing as a capitalist, so strongly agree. Try to get through this. Are we on page? Oh my God, we have to go faster. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Strongly disagree. Actually, strongly agree. Sorry, we're LARPing as a far-right person here. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Who in the West is going to agree with this question? I'm going to say strongly agree, because that's the authoritarian position. In a global survey, that might make some sense because people have been brought up in a culture where that is a norm, and even though there might be some people who contest it, so a country will depend. Like, you can't just give this question to people in the West and think that people in long-term democracies are going to answer in any way other than like pro-democratically. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Sure, we're going to be all kinds of authoritarian here. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Of course, we're going to go far right here because we're LARPing. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. See, these are things that like Carl Benjamin can answer or strongly disagree on, and it will move his answers to the right, even though he is far right. So we're going to go for authoritarian. Yes, people should be obeyed. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. How is this? All right. Let's go with think about Nazis and their degenerate art issues. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Again, this is like okay. We're gonna say strongly agree because we're LARPing as a far right person. It's a waste of time to try to rehabilitate criminals. We have quite more. I don't know why on an economic and political left-right we're doing all kinds of criminal justice stuff. But I guess you could say that's on the political side. But it seems to me that if you want to talk about politics, you could talk about the role of government. But all right, sure. We're going to say it strongly. We're LARPing here. The business and the manufacturer persons are more important than the writer and the artist. Okay, we're going to say strongly agree. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. That actually might be a question I've heard of before. So yeah, we're gonna go patriarchy. Say yes, because multinational companies are unethically exploiting the planet's the plant genetic resources of developing countries. I guess if you cared about GMOs, I mean, maybe this is from a survey about GMOs. The other thing, too, is I have a feeling now doing this questionnaire that they are picking and choosing questions from various surveys. The problem is you're not, even if a survey says this question is more left and more right, when you're just pulling from random things, you're not measuring the same concept. You're measuring a concept from a different survey that is probably embedded in a series of questions that are designed to get people thinking about that topic. So if you had asked me 4 questions before this about genetically modified foods, then maybe I would have more of an opinion. You know, I would be primed to be thinking about this and I would have formed an opinion. But just plant genetic resources, it just comes out of nowhere. So I'll say no. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Okay, we're just going to say strongly agree. I guess this is some sort of compliance. People who want a deference to authority. But deference to authority is not the same as supporting political authoritarianism. One is a mindset, the other is a government, the role of government. And by conflating these, this is not a left-right measure of politics, right? Astrology accurately explains many. What the hell? What the hell? Oh my God! Why would you be asking questions on religion in a left-right politics and economic spectrum scale? I don't understand. I don't understand. This is such garbage. This is such absolute garbage. I should do my own political compass that actually measures for people living in Western democracies only, based on, democratic forms of government that include parliamentary, Westminster, and federalist systems, proportional representation, whatever. But like long-term democracies. So it would probably be only geared toward English speakers. This is garbage. All right, astrology accurately explains many things. All right, if I'm a capitalist or a right-winger, that's what I'm trying to LARP at this entire video. How am I supposed to answer this question? It just proves this isn't a left-right measure political test. Astrology has nothing to... Okay, I'll stop. I'll say strongly agree. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea how to get a left-right answer out of this. You cannot be moral without being religious. Sure. I guess we're gonna say fundamentalists. If you're a fundamentalist Christian or something, is that what we're measuring here? Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. This is sort of an economic question, actually. But it's really more about, I guess, the role of government in providing social services. So we're gonna strongly agree with this. Some people are naturally unlucky. I know where this question is from. This actually does come from a battery about state support for, I think it says state support for the libertarian authoritarian, socialist laissez-faire. Socialist laissez-faire. I think this is from a scale that I ended up looking at for my PhD. And the idea here is you're asking people about the extent to which government has a duty to the common, the greater good, versus how much individuals are empowered to do things. So by saying some people are naturally unlucky, you're sort of saying in what sense are the situations we find ourselves out of our control, and therefore, you would assume, have to do with governments should support. Sorry, got a coffee, big gas. There we go, little burp. It's set up within a series of questions that are asking you the extent to which you think government should be a safety net. And if you think some people are naturally unlucky, you're basically acknowledging that the state should have, like there's a role there for the state to make up for the fact that some people are just unlucky. It's not their fault. Individuals don't have the sort of radical agency and autonomy to control their lives. The test is bad because Saturn is in retrograde. Thank you, Tippy. So anyone just coming along with this outside of the context of those questions about government and society are going to say, yes, some people are naturally unlucky, which would put you further to the left on the socialist scale. So again, what you're getting is people who are right-wing, out of context, might answer this question as being in favor of it, making them look farther left than they really are. So we're going to say disagree. People aren't naturally unlucky. Everyone is controlling their own fate. It is important that, and also that lucky has nothing to do with religion. Can I just, even within the concepts that they're measuring, this thing is supposed to be about religion. What does unluckiness have to do with religion? They are not even measuring the vague concept. They're not actually asking about church attendance. They're not asking about the role of God in making decisions in their lives. They're asking about astrology. This is so crap. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. People in the UK will have a very different answer to this than some people in the US. Because in the UK, a lot of schools are C of E. Religious education is taught broadly on all classrooms. Whereas in the United States, you don't have a course called religious education. You have world cultures or world history or world literature, and religions are taught as a social phenomenon, whereas in the UK they're going to be taught as part of your religious education. So someone in the UK saying yes, religious values, and I guess it's instilling religious values. So I guess that's the difference here. Let's just go strongly agree because I'm getting tired of this. Have a look at sex. All right. Again, what does sex have to do with your economic values or your view on the role of government? This sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. Why would you say usually in this case? I mean, that's just you adding usually here in a declarative statement. If you just said sex outside of marriage is immoral, you're going to get a clearer answer of yes or no from people. But if you put in here usually immoral, in what case is sex outside of marriage not immoral if you're religious? So if you're religious and you think it's always immoral, how are you supposed to answer this question? Don't know. But we're going to say strongly agree because we are LARPing. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. I'm going to strongly agree with that. I can LARP on some of these things. I can't LARP with others. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Let's go libertarian. So yeah, strongly agree. What goes on in the private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Ooh. See, now people who want to make homosexuality illegal. But again, this is one of those things where the conversation has kind of moved on. This is a bit of a 1990s question because we have now same-sex marriage is legal, and the popular opinion has moved toward this position. So again, on the skew, you're not going to get a massive distribution. You're going to get everybody on one side. It's not really a good left-right. It's not a left-right economic government thing, but I guess it's in terms of what goes on in the privacy. So no one can feel naturally homosexual. I don't even know what that has to do with your economics or the view of government. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. All right, we're going to go libertarian. Now let's see where I stand. The inadequacies of the traditional left-right line. If we recognize this essentially as an economic line, you can show Mao, and were totally a hard left. Socialists like Mahatma Gandhi would like what? That deals with economics, but the social dimension is also important in politics. I don't think they got the social dimension. That's the one where the mere left-right scale doesn't adequately address. Again, their questions, with their 6 questions per category, were not well designed. Both an economic dimension and a social dimension are important. A word about neocons. Oh, look at that. You can, if you LARP, you can do it. I think it helped a lot that I did extremes. And I think that pushed me. So, this, yeah, it's garbage. Absolutely garbage. I don't think it's useful to combine the social and the political and the religious into a category. I just don't. I think it's you should have independent scales. And I mean, even on the up-down one, I guess the way that I've looked at this in the past, and maybe it was because I didn't really know, but yeah, here there isn't like religion. When they talked about religion and the role of religion, except for one of them, it wasn't really authoritarian. It was like, schools should instill, I guess, values. What else was there? What happens in bedrooms is not the business of the government. I don't know that this 4-part scale, authoritarian left, authoritarian right, on economics and then social, I think they're combining government and... Are they combining government and social? Or are they combining government with economic? And, yes. I'm not impressed. Absolutely unimpressed. I think there's a lot... Yeah. I'm wondering now, they said a number of writers have criticized its validity. Could they have... Let's see what Tom Utley says. Because again, I'm doing this, I haven't actually thought... Writes for the Daily Mail. Who's Brian Patrick Mitchell? He's a political theorist. Okay. Let's see if we can find anything written by him regarding the political, and see what that person says. Compass and that dude. All right. The other write, what's wrong with the political compass? There's something wrong with the political compass. Excuse me, everyone. I was trying earlier this year to write an article about the fundamental values of left and right. The more I wrote about the article, unraveled itself line by line. Eventually, I made the embarrassing discovery I didn't really understand what right-wing was. Measuring things is hard. That's what I learned doing a PhD. It's not difficult to, in the physical sciences, to create a definition. For instance, we've decided, boiling water, the level at which, or the temperature at which fresh water boils at sea level is 100 degrees Celsius, right? We made up that definition, but because it's applicable everywhere you have fresh water and sea level, it's quite easy to measure. Left-right, how do you compare politically liberal in the Philippines compared to Vietnam, compared to Brazil, compared to India, compared to Britain, compared to France, compared to Canada? Each of these countries have different political traditions, different religious traditions, different cultural practices. There might be a left-right within those traditions, or in those cultures, or in those countries, but you can't just say the left here is the same as the left there. Right? So, then I made a more revealing discovery that lots of people don't know what the right wing is, and it hasn't necessarily had only one meaning throughout history. Several attempts have been made to compact the political landscape into a simple graphical form. The left-right dichotomy dates back to the French Revolution. It originally derived from Parliament's seating arrangements and became a loose proxy for the commoners versus the aristocrats, the poor versus the wealthy, the haves versus the have-nots. The political compass is the most popular expansion on the left-right spectrum. It is built on an earlier work by Hans Enzick's Political Personalities, in case you haven't seen it. The political compass is a graph that plots left-right on one axis versus authoritarian libertarianism on the other, except it doesn't. In my brief research, I did also see Dave Nolan's The Nolan Chart, but my personal favorite was Brian Patrick Mitchell's less well-known RK Kratos plot. I like Mitchell's idea so much that I purchased his book 8 Ways of Running the Country. It's a fantastic read that I highly recommend. He cleared up for me that the left-right dichotomy has shifted definitions over years. Did we not talk about this? I got you guys. I got you on the cutting edge. He cleared up for me that the left-right dichotomy has shifted definition over the years, viewed by some as having fascism at the far right, by others as having individualists at the far right. Mitchell developed his own plot, meaning recognition of rank, right to rule, versus kratos, meaning use of force. However, Mitchell's plot seems flawed in the same way the political compass is. My basic problem with them is that the presence of logical no-go zones. Yada, 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 yada. Yeah. Measuring things is hard. And also, you can't just pull questions that are deemed to be left-right out of the middle of a series of questions that are all meant to measure one concept. So, what they should have done, if they wanted to be more... here are the ways I would have approved this. One is I would have had people say what country they are, well, you get a lot of movement now. So I guess, say, in what country did you spend the majority of your life growing up? So political socialization is, I don't have to show this anymore. I guess I'll leave the chat up in case you guys have things to say. So political socialization has, from childhood onwards, does have lifelong effects. The values that are instilled in us as children early on might change. That's basically the defaults of where we start, and then life can change, or maybe our situations change, or we get exposed to other things, but that, that's where we start off. One way I can give you as an example of this is if you look at the situation, if you look at Eastern European countries, you get far lower levels of religiosity in even East Germany compared to parts of West Germany, in Eastern Bloc countries compared to Western countries. But just because people are less religious doesn't mean they don't reflect values we associate with religiosity, like patriarchy and homophobia. The fact is that you have higher levels of homophobia in Eastern European countries despite having a religious basis for their justification. Whereas in the Western countries, you might have higher levels of religiosity, but also people can kind of divorce their political opinions from their religious beliefs and are far more accepting of homosexual relationships and legalized marriage, of marriage equality. Where was I going with this? I don't know. I don't remember. So I think I was talking about how to improve it. Right. So identifying the country which you spent the majority of your childhood would automatically provide you'd have to have like sort of individualized frameworks. You can't just put everyone in the world on these dimensions. It just doesn't work. What it probably ends up having, because it's in English, it probably ends up having a real Western bias to it. And as a consequence, you end up measuring Western values of these concepts. The other thing is, if you're going to ask 6 questions on religion, they have to all be on the same concept of religion. So just asking about astrology and instilling religion in schools and whatever. I mean, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth should have been in the religious question area, right? Not the personal values. But anyway, when, for instance, in my thesis, I wanted to disambiguate between the concepts of human agency, human connection or communion, and then being comfortable with being emotionally vulnerable. Maybe you can bring this up. The personal attributes questionnaire. Yep. I've searched for this before because it was the basis of my thesis. Alright. Yeah, it's called the instrumentality. That's agency. No, I don't want the one from, I don't want the original one. Well, okay, I guess I can show you the original one because I ended up working with a reduced scale. There was more work done later on with these questions, and in order to get the validity of the scale a bit more precise. And I could only ask 3 because our questionnaire was limited to 100 questions, including some of the socio-demographic ones or whatever else. So as a consequence, because we had so many other questions we needed to ask, 9 questions out of 100 is like 10% of the survey. And when you want to be able to triangulate this new measure with traditional measures, you need a lot of space for the traditional measures like left, right, party identification, and other things. So it's really 100 questions goes quick. Right. So in order to measure, let's just look at this, right? Now, this scale has actually been, I used a reduced version of only 24 questions to measure 3 concepts. 8 questions for one concept. And it wasn't religion. Religion is a huge topic. This was, I would say, agency or communion or emotional vulnerability. So we have 3 concepts here. And this is actually the same wording I used. I just took this exact wording. We put this in the YouGov survey. So you're looking at my replication. We replicated it perfectly, identically. And then we asked people on these extremes, would you call yourself not at all or very? Now, what I pointed out before about how there's a bias in terms of saying not, I strongly agree to strongly disagree. But in this case, I had to replicate what the original authors did in the 70s in order to be comparable. If I started switching things around, then I'm not replicating. So I was kind of stuck with what they had. Here you have to rate yourself. Would you say that you're not at all aggressive or very aggressive? Are you not at all independent or very independent? These 2 measures are measures of agency. Not at all emotional, very emotional. This is emotional vulnerability. Very submissive, very dominant. In this case, I think that's an agency measure. Not at all excitable in a major crisis. Very excitable in a major crisis. This one, I think if I remember this correctly, it's weird because I don't really like this question. I think it is too open for interpretation. I think it is very fuzzy as a concept. But I think it performs well in terms of its validity, if I remember correctly. Very passive to very active. This, again, is an agency measure. Not able to devote self completely to others. Able to devote self completely to others. This is a connection or a communion measure. Very rough to very gentle. I don't know what that is. I don't remember that question. That might have been one of the ones that got dropped because it doesn't perform very well. I should also tell you where they got these. So the idea here was in the 1970s, psychologists wanted to know if gender and gender roles and sex were all clustered together into like a binary, or did they fall on a spectrum? And the way that they decided to measure gender and gender roles and disambiguate it from sex was to ask undergraduates, white undergraduates at American universities, because of course, lists of words that they associate with the idealized cis man. I mean, they didn't say that at the time, but that's what they meant. Or the idealized woman. And they took those responses, things like able to devote self to others, difficulty making decisions apparently, cries easily, feeling self-confidence, warm in relations to others. And they clustered them by the gendered frameworks of the man and the woman. And then they turned them into questions. And so they took those normative associations, and then they asked people to rank themselves on it. And if sex and gender were one dimension, you would see all the men giving certain answers, all the same answers in the same direction, and all women should give different, the feminine answers in the same positive feminine direction. Or positive, I mean, like number, like positive as in plus, not normative plus. And what they found was people varied. Sometimes men would say that they felt themselves able to give themselves to others, or they felt very warm in their relations, and other women rated themselves as very dominant. And what they realized is that, yeah, these gendered attributes don't map onto sex. That the values are personalized and people draw on things from the culture. And even though in an idealized form, the stereotypes, or the archetypes, I should think, that's what the archetypes that we see in film of the damsel in distress doesn't reflect the reality. I mean, that's what society tells us. Men are rescuers and women are the rescued. Women are helpless and men are strong. But in our daily lives, those norms don't actually apply in the way that we see in our societies. Hey, Bruce, how you doing? I gotta talk, Bruce, yeah, I'm gonna write you an email, but it's gonna be another, I had a really late night last night. So I did my D&D game, and then I was up till 4 a.m, and I know I said I was gonna write you an email. So I'm glad you're in the chat. But yeah, is it okay? Can I just delay one more day? I need a nap after this. I wasn't expecting this show to go to 2 hours. I thought I'd be done in an hour. So I'm really happy to see you, and I'm really happy to stop by, and thank you for reaching out. So yeah, shout out to Bruce. Yeah, but I'll just drop you a line to confirm that in case you missed it. Yeah, so we have all of these 24 questions just to measure 3 concepts. And all of them end up like hanging together in a latent class analysis to be 3 factors. So this idea that you can just pick 6 questions on religion. So when we talk about instrumentality or agency here, it has got a very specific definition. The degree to which you feel you have the power to shape your life, control your life, control others. That's your agency. That's the amount of like power you have in the world. It's got a very specific definition. Communion is the degree to which you feel connected with, warm toward, or sort of like self-sacrificing towards others. You are a communion. You are connected with them. If you just mix up astrology and state schools, you're not measuring anything. You're just picking questions and throwing them together. All right. Okay, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me a 24-hour reprieve. I just don't like to tell someone I'm going to do something and then not follow through. And so, yeah, I think it's incredibly impolite to say to someone I'm going to do X and then not follow through. I would much rather they say I can't follow through today, but I can follow through. So thank you very much for your indulgence. I appreciate it. Fandabidozy. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Morse like 100 questions. Morse, the TV show Morse? Right. So my assessment is that the political, like others who are professionals who have gone before me, the political compass is garbage. It is not a measure of your left, right. And I like here, and we tried very hard to deliberately provoke answers using the extreme end of the spectrum to see how far we could get. So there is, if you answer in the most extreme ways, and you try to be consistent, knowing what the question is supposed to be asking, then it is possible to get a right-wing response. But here's the thing, as I said, asking about astrology and some of the other normative questions will just give right-wingers an opportunity to look more reasonable than they are, or to give a different answer than they would if they were actually asked the battery of question from which the question was stolen. The other problem I have with it is that they don't tell you where they got these questions from. When I do a study in such a way, I have to cite the authors of these. If I'm replicating somebody else's work, I need to give them credit. And it looks like the political compass just stole a lot of other people's intellectual property and ideas and are benefiting from it without giving them the credit. So no respect there for their plagiarism. Another tick against them. Yeah, again, if I had infinite amount, no, I have lots of time. I just lack the will. It would be a lot of work to actually go through like professional studies. So things I could draw on would be the World Value Survey, the European Value Survey, the Eurobarometer, particular studies in English that I'm aware of, like the American National Election Study. They have a series of questions they run consistently and that have been well tested. There's also like British election study, the British sociological, the BSA. I don't know what that stands for because I'm not a sociologist. But there are well-tested, well-run, replicated questions, but you'd have to be so narrow in the concept that you're measuring. So one of them could be the degree to which government should engage in redistribution. I mean, there is a left-right spectrum on there, but it's a very narrow left-right spectrum. So you could find a bunch of questions about the appropriate levels of taxation and redistribution. And you could ask 6 questions on that, and you could get a vague placement on a very narrow element of people's idea of the role of government in redistributing wealth and the role of taxation. But I would hesitate to put that on some sort of wider left-right political... I would just have individual left-right measures. I wouldn't try to do this sort of box thing. I don't think that's useful. I would just have on the role of, let's say, I guess you could conceptualize the role of religion in government, or the degree to which government should enforce religion, on a left-right spectrum, but that's a spectrum of religious fundamentalism, not politics in the way we sort of think about the role of government in Western democracies. So we could make a political compass as part of Weekend Winters. That's kind of what I'm thinking, actually. Yeah. I see. The thing is, I'm already in the. There's so much. I realize there's so much ignorance. It's not a fault of like people are. I'm not saying ignorance in terms of like people are bad, but there's just so much in my head that I know because I've been doing political science, and I was trained in. Like I took a course in political theory and things on like institutionalism. People overemphasize how much agency an individual has when they come into an institution with norms that already pre-exist. And this is I was debating V on police stops in Minneapolis. There was a study that came out that even though whites make up the vast majority of the people who live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 78% of the people pulled over for traffic stops were black or people of color. That's ridiculous. Like, that's not random chance. That's a racist practices. And V's like, well, the mayor is a Democrat, so they should just fix it. I'm like, no, you moron. That's not how things work. The mayor isn't able to just unilaterally wave a magic. She's not a queen or a king. She's not a monarch. She can't just do things by executive fiat. There are unions that have been indoctrinated, for generations in the mindset of the slave patrols who moved over to be the cops. And you can't just say, oh, we're going to change these policies and it's going to change attitudes. Because those people come into those institutions with those attitudes, not only long-standing, but norms in terms of what expectations are, how you're evaluated, how you're treated, and you are shaped by that institution. It's why it's so difficult to be a whistleblower. It's why Congress has tried to put together so many whistleblower protections, because everything about, your job is at stake, your reputation is at stake, your references are at stake. And if you see wrongdoing and you are a peon, going after the people who are actually doing the corruption or enabling it could ruin your life. So there are powerful institutional forces working against you coming forward. And as a consequence, corruption continues. Even good people will not feel the ability to stand up in the face of that because they can't afford to. They can't afford to have their careers ruined. This is this kind of power that Harvey Weinstein was using to exercise to keep women silenced. And yet, people tend to overemphasize the agency of an individual. So anyway, getting back to the political test. A late response is the least of your worries. Oh, thanks. Oh, Bruce, you are such a sweetie. Thank you so much. Yeah, maybe we could look at, like building up our own political compass. But then, of course, this is the thing, you have an idea. Okay, I could do that. I could find left-right questions. That's not so, that's the easy part. The hard part is designing the website and the responses and and all that kind of stuff that goes along with it. But yeah, it would be really nice to have a politically science-based alternative to the political compass that would actually expose, like if I'm just trying to think, if Carl Benjamin took the questions I'm thinking of in my head in public, he couldn't lie in a way that allows him to look left. When it comes to like doing too much to get, BMAE and women candidates in parliament, he couldn't lie on that and say, oh, I don't think enough has been done, because his audience wouldn't accept it. And that would force him, it would put social pressure on him to answer more true to the content he produces, and it's going to end up with a right-wing response. So, I mean, my fantasy would be to have the time to put together a very well-tested series of questions from batteries that have been well-established, and maybe a mix of sociological and political, but I'd have to look at that, and then put them up on a website and then challenge, hey, Shoe on Head, take this political test. Hey, Tim Pool, take this political test. Sargon, take this. Take this political test. You think you're centrist? You think you're left? Not according to actual political scientists, you're not. So that would be fun. All right, well, I hope you guys, from the sounds of it, all my geeks in the chat found this interesting. If you missed the first part of it, I do a whole breakdown of various complications that go into measuring people's views and attitudes and all of the barriers and things that we have to anticipate and think very deliberately about as social scientists, from the wording of the question. We didn't even talk about the ordering of the question. Priming people, double barrel. So priming people is when you kind of like make some assumptions in the question that lead them to a certain answer. Double-barreled questions, you ask about multiple concepts in the same question, so you're not quite sure what people are responding to. Lots of things go into well-designed, well-crafted, accurate survey questions. And the political compass test tries to steal some of those questions. Some of them, I don't know where they got it, but in the end, it's not a metric that I would, if I could get a hold of the data, which they don't release, and I could do latent class analysis on each of the categories, I have no doubt that there would be at least 3 or 4 different concepts being measured in each of those series of questions in the battery, and there should only be one. Should only have one factor loading. All right. Maybe if you guys are, if you wanted me to explain factor analysis and latent class analysis, well, latent class analysis is about populations, but latent factors and latent concepts and how we try to get at things indirectly in political science and social science, because if you ask people directly, they just lie. Yeah, we'll talk to you guys next week. If there is some interest in that, I guess let me know next week, and I can pull some stuff up on factor analysis, principal components analysis, confirmatory factor analysis, and how we look at validity in our questions and how we agonize over whether we're measuring what we think we're measuring. Until next Sunday, guys, I've been Christy. You guys have all been awesome. I love the fact I can geek out with you guys. It makes me super happy. Have a good week until then. Stay COVID-free, stay healthy. Stay cool if you're in the northern hemisphere, and I guess stay warm if you're in the southern hemisphere. All right. Oh, I don't have the right I don't have the right page up. I'm saying goodbye, and I don't have the right button. There's the right button. All right. I'll catch you guys later. Be well.